Now we've made it to this century, my friends, and we're going to take a look at behavioral economics, which is, and I love this idea, and this is actually something that I think as 21st century human beings, we start to realize that we're much more complex than maybe the neoclassicists or the monetarists or even Keynes thought that we were. In the sense that economic theory is based on this assumption, there's an unbelievable amount of assumptions in economics, which makes it super fascinating. But the assumption that me and you will make a rational decision when we buy something. And that's not necessarily true. And that rational decision is based on this idea that we're fully informed and that we're acting self-interest in our own self-interest. Self-interest is an underpinning of economic theory, capitalism in general, in the sense that as a consumer, I will take care of my own self-interest by only paying what I want to pay for a particular good, what's best for me. And producers are self-interested in the sense that they're only trying to maximize their profit, right? So producers maximizing profit and consumers maximizing their utility. But there's kind of actually things that don't really happen that way, like when someone might pay a little bit extra for an electric car. And the reason they might pay a little bit extra for that extra car is the sense that they care about the environment. So it's costing them a little bit more money, but they want to have something more sustainable. And this is where the 9 central concepts of IB economics need to start popping back into your head, because if I'm not acting rationally, but I'm acting, and that rationally means that I'm basing my decisions on my own self-interest. But I'm thinking about the climate. I'm thinking about being socially responsible. I'm thinking about doing my part for the greater good of the world. Then the old neoclassical, classical, monetarist view kind of breaks down. And this is a new field of study, which is super cool because we're on the cutting edge now of economic thought. Behavioral economics is brand new. And so as a result of that, I think it's something that's really rich. And it's also something that's very debatable. And when something's rich and debatable in IB economics, guess what? You can write an absolutely killer evaluation of something. Because when something's debatable, you have to make judgments with not complete information, but make it convincingly. And that's how you get top marks on the IB exam, okay? So let's take a look at what it is. And we'll go through it slowly, and then we'll build back to kind of where I ended with that introduction. Okay, so behavioral economics challenges the assumptions that we as humans act in an economically rational manner when given choices in the marketplace, okay? So this is the branch of economics that incorporates, check it, the insights of psychology and recognizes that the choices consumers make are governed by many factors that are not consistent with the assumptions behind the neoclassical model. And that quote comes from Jocelyn Blink and Ian Dorton's excellent course companion to IB Economics. Okay, this was pioneered by Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize in 2017. I mean, we're talking about recent stuff here. Okay, so it's pretty cool. But when you think about behavioral economics, I think this where economics meets psychology is a great way of thinking about it. But really, all throughout this whole unit on the evolution of economic thought, you see how there's this evolution of thought, this evolution of thought of combining human behavior and statistical data to understand how we behave in an economic sense. It's pretty cool. Okay, so what did Richard Thaler argue? He argued that rational choice humans don't exist. Which is pretty awesome. He's like, these people that these neoclassicists have been talking about forever, they don't even exist. I love that. It like blows up the whole basis of all, the old school idea of like rational economic behavior of human beings. They're like, what he said about behavioral economics is it aims to understand the decision-making process of actual human beings, like me and you. We're much more complex than this rational person, We might just buy something because we want to. We're excited. We want to, whatever. Or we're sad, so we go to the mall and like make ourselves happy by buying a bunch of stuff we don't really need, right? That's not rational. Okay, so he focused on this idea of like, human beings are more complex than rational economic theory. Okay, so one of the things that he really said, and he wrote a book that kind of coined this term, is that consumers can be nudged to make decisions that are better for society. An example of that, and who's doing the nudging? Now, this is where it gets politically hot, this conversation. Who's doing the nudging? The government's doing the nudging, right? The parents of the economy are doing the nudging. And what might that be? Well, I'll give you an example here in Chile. About 3 years ago, they started putting these black labels on all of the food in this country that have high calories, high levels of sugar, or were somehow deemed unhealthy for you. And they get this like black stop sign put on there, right? Well, that's labeling of food. And that is creating, maybe some more intelligence. So the idea is that those labels are nudge consumers away from purchasing, a Snickers bar because it's full of chocolate and high in calories, high in sugar, because it's not good for society as a whole. Because if we have obese people, and that happens when people eat too much sugar, then it's bad for society as a whole. So people can be nudged towards doing stuff. Okay, so therefore, people can be nudged to make better choices, leading to improved living standards overall for society, health, communities, and the environment. Okay. So this nudge theory that like the government's role is not to restrict people, but to inform them. Somebody who really believes in behavioral economics will say like, no, this is the government being responsible by informing people that what they're buying is not necessarily that healthy. And they're responsible for the whole economy. So if we have everybody eating too many sugar products, that's going to be bad in the long run for health reasons, and that's going to tax the health system. One other thing the Chilean government did that was pretty interesting is they took off all cartoon characters from anything that's anything sold. For like Toucan Sam, Fruit Loops, gone. Any representation of a cartoon that would be attractive to kids that has to do with sugar, ciao, you can't use it anymore. Okay, that's the nudge theory, another example of that. So, but of course, you can understand that the nudge theory or behavioral economics is not without its critics. So some of the things that people say about behavioral economics, and because it promotes government intervention, government intervention, there are people that don't like the government involved, is that it's taking away individual rights. Man, if I want to buy Fruit Loops for my kid, just shut up and let me buy it, right? I can do that. That's my individual right to do that if I want, okay? Or it redefines the role of government, and people don't feel like the government is best necessarily the one that should be the entity in society that's informing people about what's healthy and what's not. It sets up a debate between free market economies and those with government intervention. So there's this continual tension in economics, constant tension between free markets, where the government is not involved, take that back to Adam Smith, and this understanding that the government needs to get involved, and by getting involved, always that leads to usually rising costs for producers, but also a loss of maybe personal freedoms for people who can't make certain choices because things are banned, right? So this debate between free markets and government intervention and the relative amount of intervention that is, quote, right, is exactly why people get in big arguments around your dinner table at night if they disagree about the role of government. And the thing is, and this hits on it exactly where I like you to think, is that that's this. Economics is politics. Or another way of saying, and this is what my old professor once said, there's no such thing as politics. It's all just an expression of economic thought. And I listened to him say that, and I thought he was like some arrogant old guy that was an economist professor, of course, so of course he's going to make economics like the most important thing in the world. But man, it's kind of true. Our economic well-being creates our political thought. Our level of tolerance for government intervention in our lives comes from, a lot of times, the economic views we have of what the government should or should not do. And so that adage, there's no such thing as politics, it's all economics. While I didn't necessarily agree at the time, I'm telling you, and I've said this to my students over the years in IB economics, like, can anyone tell me that's not true? Because I like being wrong. So if that's not true, I would love to hear an example of where economics is not the underlying decision, the underlying factor, or the underlying belief of some sort of political decision. All right? Cool. So now we're up to date, right? We're up to date with this notion of behavioral psychology, and it can show us very, very new stuff. Very, very new stuff. It can show us a lot of new things about the ways in which humans behave. And remember, as economists, we are studying human behavior. All right, and on we go to the next video.